Hey, so welcome today. And we've got a great speaker here. This is Zoe Jane Hindle, and I've been having a conversation with her recently about cycle syncing and the importance of us as women knowing about when we can, work with our menstrual cycle so that we're actually supported through that and that we're taking on the world when we need to and when we're going to have time to rest and recuperate. So, Zoe, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you, Chloe. Hello, everyone. I am Zoe Jane Hindle, and I am training to be a functional wellness coach right now. So I've been studying for almost a year within my spare time, and I work in for an investment bank full time. Um, I have had my own health challenges over the last however many years since I got my period. So I'm really, really passionate about women's health, periods, optimizing the time we have, optimizing our hormones, optimizing all of the resources we have, and encouraging more of this discussion so that women know how they can benefit from their cycle instead of it being a hindrance. So I'd say that's it in a nutshell.
Perfect. And I think that this, like, in speaking with people over the last few days, like, there's so many women that just don't take into consideration where they're at with their cycle and why they're finding it a bit of a struggle some of the days of the week, like some of the days of the month, and like um, why sometimes they're ready to take on the world and things like that. So it's really good to take into consideration our monthly cycle.
Yeah, and we're not, no one was really taught this in school. I mean, I don't know if it's part of the curriculum now, but I didn't really know like about my cycle and when I was ovulating, for example, until my 20s, which is crazy. That's like 10 years into having periods. So I feel
Exactly.
like there's such a gap of knowledge, which I think is definitely improving now with conversations like this and people talk about it more, but I think there's a lot more way to go.
I really think as well that if we have more awareness of how we can like optimize working around our cycle as well, we can really get the best out
Mm.
of each other. And like all the women that I work with and also like all of my audience are all like female business owners,
Mhm.
mostly working by themselves, mostly finding themselves in a bit of a slump once a month when they just don't feel like doing anything and then they get themselves frustrated. So it's really nice to be able to talk with you today and kind of share the science behind it.
Yes.
So we've created a bit of a graphic, which is all about cycle syncing. So this will be shared alongside the podcast, but it essentially, as Zoe has been sharing with me, like we have 4 phases of the month. Yeah, of the month. And
Yep.
as part of that, they're basically like seasons, which I love to think about. So Zoe, do you want to introduce the seasons?
Yeah, so first of all, they kind of cycle day one is classed as the first day of your period, and that's classed as the winter. And that is very much when your hormones are very low. So your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, so your main sex hormones are very low, and you've got your period. So this is the time where we really need to think about how we're going to rest, how we can recharge in amongst our busy day-to-day jobs, businesses, demands, family life, etc. And that can be quite challenging for a lot of women, especially as you say, if it's all the responsibility is on you. You know,
Mhm.
how are you going to be able to carve out that time for yourself to rest when your hormones are low if it's all on you?
Exactly.
So going through each season and knowing how the hormones work throughout the month hopefully means that you can push through on the times where your hormones are higher, so you can carve out some of that times in the winter phase, as we call it, when you've got your period, which is usually from days 1 to 5, depending on the type of woman you are. Everyone is so different. Some people have a period that's 3 days, some might have a bleed that's 7 days, but we try and say between 1 and 5 is the normal range.
Yeah. And recently I've actually been blocking out my diary as well so that I use those days in the month as my admin time because they're
Mhm.
not times that I want to show up and make videos. They're not times where I want all of my meetings back to back. And they're
Hmm.
not really times where I really want to think about like business development and growth and
Yeah.
strategy. So actually, like, that's not the time of the month to be doing that. So I'm like, let's do all the quiet things that I'm like are just like methodical tasks that I can just follow a process.
Yeah, and that's the time of the month where your creativity is going to be at its lowest because your testosterone is going to be lower, your estrogen is going to be lower, and they are the two stimulating hormones that really spark your productivity, your creativity, feeling inspired, motivated. So, kind of knowing that will hopefully give a lot of women the opportunity to cut themselves a bit of slack and just like you've done do the mundane admin, the things that just have to get done, and then you're not being hard on yourself, thinking, why aren't I being creative right now? Why aren't I thinking of all these ideas like business development and back-to-back clients? Because your body isn't made to do these things right now. You're made to kind of rest during this time, and admin is the perfect time for that.
Yeah.
Winter is for admin.
Into is admin. I love
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it's cool to like log some sort of like tasks around with your cycle as well.
Yeah, and just, forward planning your month and future months, knowing that you can get all your admin done then. And then it's just easy. You kind of just know that that's going to be done then. And those are the days that you do certain tasks. And for every woman, it'll be different. They'll have the more mundane, easier tasks for them. And you can just try and slot them in. And then over the course of a few months, you'll just start to get into a nice groove of, right, this is when I'm going to do that and
Yeah.
feel good about it.
Yeah, exactly. So what's our
So
next phase?
next phase. So then we move into spring. So after your period finishes, and that's if you're a menstruating woman, by the way. Obviously, depending on the type of contraception you're on, if you're on any, not every woman is going to have a normal bleed, or they might not even bleed at all. But some women will still feel the seasons. So that's an important thing to add. So, for example, you might be on the progesterone only pill, progestin only pill, and you might not bleed, but you still feel these mood shifts. So I just want to add that caveat because every woman is so different and their personal choices are different. But normally within spring, that's when your hormones are starting to rise. So that is when your lovely hormone estrogen, which is your primary sex hormone, that is when that is starting to slowly come up. You're heading towards ovulation, which we will refer to as summer. Um, and this is when you start to just you feel a bit more yourself. You might want to have more meetings, you might want to socialize a little bit more. You start to get some creativity back, and you start to just have a little spring in your step. And it tends to be quite a nice feeling moving towards that phase. You might want to exercise more. So this will be the time to add in the more demanding
Yeah,
parts of your job and really
like the
utilizing
business
that time.
development and kind of working with like sort of sketching out some ideas and things,
Yes.
planning.
Planning is a good one. Anything that involves real motivation in your tasks, where you really have to think and apply some thinking around it. This is a great time to do it within the spring phase. And this tends to be from, say, let's say day 5 of your cycle, heading up to say day 12, 13, 14, depending on when a woman ovulates. So it's quite a chunk of your menstrual cycle. So you've got quite a nice amount of time. For example, as a business owner, yep, there we go. You've got a nice amount of time as a business owner to hopefully get a lot of things done. Um, but also, you might have months where it takes you a bit longer to get to that real oomph stage. And it's all just being mindful and just being kind to yourself, because every month you will be different. It all depends on how stressful your home life is, everything. Um, but spring tends to be the time where you can start to feel inspired and start to make traction with some projects, development, lots of meetings with clients. If you have to be on video or camera for anything or any form of content, this is when you might want to do that because you've got estrogen. Estrogen is your vitality. So, you start to feel really good about yourself. And they say as you head towards ovulation, like you start to really feel good about yourself. They even say your face symmetry changes during this time. So like that's the time when you really, you're giving the good vibes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great time of the month to do all of those things
Yeah.
and like to have a video day or something
Yes.
like that if that fits.
Content. If you have anything to do with content as part of your job or your business, that's really the time. And like face-to-face interaction, because that's when you're more likely to be more outward
Yeah.
and more, say, extroverted if you are that way inclined. Then later on in your cycle, which we'll get to, which is when you might want to go more inward. So I definitely be trying to make the most of face-to-face time. Communication is a big one. You're going to feel more open to talking to people, doing things. So yeah, it's definitely a good time to utilize for that. Is that what you do during your
Yeah.
spring time?
Yeah, I think that, like I'm in that phase at the moment and I feel like
Mm,
I'm just sort of like planting all the seeds of like things like that are going to come into fruition in business like kind of later
yeah.
on. And yeah, I've been showing like starting to show up on video and stuff again because I
Mm,
was showing up quite a lot like during my like autumn actually and then
mm,
menstruation this month and I was like, nope, I don't want to do any videos. I'm not into that right now.
yeah.
And as I come into my follicular phase now, I'm like, right, let's get back out there. So
Yeah. And so then after we have spring, we start to move into the summer phase, which is technically part of the follicular phase, but we like to split it out a little bit because this is when the hormones really start to rise and they
quite a
peak.
segment really, isn't it?
Yes. So ovulation technically lasts for 1 day, but because the male part of the of conception. So sperm lasts for like 5 to 6 days. So technically your fertile period is about 6 days. But ovulation tends to be over a couple of days. You will get a surge in hormones because your body is thinking, right, it's time to have a baby. So you get a nice healthy dose of testosterone, which is you'll find that you might have more endurance in the gym or just during your working day. You will have a bit more creativity, a lot more oomph. You'll feel really good about yourself, the way you look. You most definitely will want to be on camera then. You most definitely will want to be executing products and projects and any kind of big pieces of work. This is the time to
It's
really
like
push
trying
it
to sort
forward.
of like really like deliver.
Deliver. Yes, that is the perfect word. This
Mm.
is when you want to deliver. And there was actually a study. I can't remember the exact source, but they did a review on women business owners and when they were pitching for funding. And those
Wow.
women, when they did the pitching for the funding, when they were ovulating versus another time in their cycle, and they got the funding, and these women were like in their absolute element when they were ovulating versus say in their luteal phase when they don't have the same testosterone or
Yeah,
estrogen. So
that's
it's really
interesting as well, isn't
interesting.
it? Like when you think about like how men behave in business as well, like there's no like they act completely different because they've
Yeah,
got testosterone all the time, but we
yeah.
also have it too, like for a few
We
days.
also have it too, which a lot of men don't know. And someone even said that to me today. They're like, I didn't know that women have testosterone. I'm like, yes, we do. It's a lower amount, but I definitely use this surge in testosterone to your advantage. So, for example, as a single, like a female business owner, being able to know, right, I've got these few days where I can really, if you're really having to like grow your business, you know, this is a good time to really use that to your advantage. And it's not just testosterone. You also get a big surge in estrogen. So how you've been feeling throughout spring, you're going to get that in a bucket load because you get a whole bunch more estrogen and paired with the testosterone, a smaller peak of progesterone, but that comes later. So this is such a great time for anything really, even, non-work related, socializing. It's a good time to go on holiday. I personally I would plan trips around my spring and summertime because they're the time that I'm feeling really social, especially if I'm going on trips with friends, for example. Like that's just something I would prefer to do. So yeah, during summer, that's perfect time to deliver.
Amazing. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, and then our final phase.
Yes, autumn. So every woman will vary, yes, so much throughout autumn. So this starts from as soon as you ovulate. Usually say cycle day 16, but again it varies from woman to woman. So after all your hormones peak and you have this lovely surge, estrogen, for example, takes a bit of a dip. Testosterone goes back to normal. And then see, after you ovulate, some women might get this feeling of like a lull because obviously you've been on this high, but then estrogen slowly starts to rise again throughout your luteal phase. And of course, this is when progesterone starts to come in. So progesterone, a lot of women will associate with pregnancy because that is when it's at its highest, like progestation. But progesterone is our calming hormone. So when you're in your luteal phase, having a healthy amount of progesterone is really important for kind of getting through that phase, sleeping well, and it's more the rest and digest. So this is very much the time to do more calmer tasks. You go a little bit more inwards. You might not want to be on camera. You might not want to have back to backs. Every woman is different. Some women might only feel like that, say, the few days before they get their period. Some women might feel like that for a longer stage. And this is when, you can experience PMS, or for women that experience PMDD, this is the phase where all that starts to come into play before your period. So every woman is so different. Some women will just breeze through their luteal phase, managing their day to day and their workload exactly the same. Other women will have to factor this in and schedule it into their diaries, especially if you do get something like PMDD or PMS. And also later in life, throughout our 30s and 40s, 50s, as we transition through perimenopause and menopause, progesterone really takes a hit, first of all, for all women. Then your estrogen starts to go haywire. So it's really being mindful of that. If your progesterone is that little bit lower anyway, because of our age, you are going to have a little bit of a lower resilience. So if you're tackling big projects, if you're tackling a lot of stress within your business, you might find this to be a challenging time. And this is when you can, make sure your nutrition is on point. You can supplement. Supplements throughout this phase are really good to help give you a boost, especially if you suffer from PMS. I swear by magnesium for everyone. Everyone should take it. That's like an absolute basic. And then there's lots of other things you can take. But I'd say this is the time where you also want to go a little bit more inwards. And it's quite a long part of your cycle. So you do want to obviously be able to still maintain productivity, because as a business owner, you can't just sit there for 10 days, 2 weeks and just not do anything. So making sure that you are, like you say on your lovely graphic, working in short bursts, then giving yourself a bit of a lull and then going again. And especially those few days before your period, making sure that you are going a bit more easy on yourself, maybe making sure the diary is a little bit more empty, or not overloading yourself, especially because this is the time, as your hormones just before your period, they go all the way down, they do decrease. That is when you're really prone to burnout, because when you're pushing and your hormones are low, then there's a lot of stress on your adrenals, for example, and a lot of stress in your body. And that's what you don't want, because you don't want to start getting this burnout cycle when there's no one else in your business that can pick up the slack if it is just you.
Yeah, and that's something as well that we're both passionate about, is that sort of
Mhm.
like being aware of burnout. And
Yeah.
like I love the idea of working around, like working with my cycle to stop myself
Mhm.
burning out, because I know that during that autumn phase is always when I've been pushing myself to like deliver
Mhm.
projects,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I just feel like I'm eating away at my adrenal glands and just be like, oh, why am I so like, and like drinking all the coffee, which of course
Yes.
is like depleting my body.
Yeah.
And you're like not sleeping so properly, and you're getting PMS, and you're like, when you're running a business, it's, there's sometimes like you really have to think on your feet, and you could be under a lot of pressure. You've got PMS on top of that, you
Oh.
could, like, it's hell.
Yes, that's a wild ride. And our adrenals, we really need them as we get older, especially when we go through menopause and our ovaries start to effectively switch off. it's kind of the adrenal show then. The adrenals are very much on the front row and they are helping to make a lot of our hormones. So we don't want to knacker out our adrenals in our 20s, 30s, 40s. That is absolutely paramount because then we will get in trouble later in life. And as someone that has suffered with burnout, so I was very, very low progesterone and I was push, 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 push. And then I do have adrenal fatigue and I'm currently on medical leave at the moment. And my cortisols just couldn't, sorry, my adrenals just couldn't produce cortisol anymore. So I can talk from being in that position that someone that's gone through it, that it is very unpleasant and the recovery is like 3 to 6 months. I'd say 6 months plus actually. And no business owner wants to go through that. And each month being able to plan according to your cycle will really give you the best chance of preventing that burnout,
Yeah.
which is just on top of, maintaining productivity throughout the month. You don't want to borrow from your future on a daily basis, which I think is really important. And to not put yourself under any extra pressure because it will break one day and you don't want that to happen.
Exactly. And, when we are working by ourselves in business as well, we burn ourselves out. There is no one to cover us most of the time. So this is why we need to be really, really vigilant
Mm-hmm.
where we're at and like checking in with ourselves, like how we're feeling, what we can cope with right now, what
Mm-hmm.
things we can put in place, etc. Because like if you can't work, then can the business function without you? If you're a service-based business, this is really difficult.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's really paramount to have a really good support system. And even if you are like on your own in your business and you're carrying a lot of the load, making sure you've got good family and friends that are there to support you. You're looking after your body in terms of the food you're eating. So a whole food diet. I don't think caffeine is the devil, but if you're having 10 cups of coffee throughout the day and if you're drinking it past lunchtime, that will affect your sleep. And sleep, you need that for recovery. So I would suggest not having coffee later than 12. And in fact, in your luteal phase, trying to make sure it's even earlier than that if you're a coffee drinker. If you can cut it out, you'll find that your PMS is probably going to be better. But I personally have to have my one coffee in the day. In the morning, it keeps me sane. I'm sure a lot of people are the same. So there's lots of things you can do. And it's also, the messaging of we need to push through, like I'm really strong, I can handle this. It's not to say that someone can't handle it, it's just working within your limits of your body's capabilities and your physiology as a woman,
Yeah,
and allowing yourself that flexibility to push when you can push, when you're meant to push, and then just to go a bit more inwards throughout your cycle when you're built to do that.
exactly. I'm so looking forward to hearing the feedback from everyone listening to this podcast because, like we've been saying, like this is just not something that people are that aware of at all.
Yeah.
And like the people I've spoken to over the last couple of days, I was like, wow, I never thought of it like that. And I've actually started saying to people now when they're saying, oh, I can't do that, or that's a struggle. I'm like, okay, where are you at in your cycle?
Yeah.
What's that got it relevance to? And I'm like, it's got a lot of relevance.
Oh, huge. And it's
Really?
so good that you're asking that question. I think the more women that openly ask that question, like I heard a hairdresser say before, she's like, sorry if I'm not that chatty today, but I'm getting my period next week. Excuse me. And just being opened, you imagine a hairdresser is like chatty, chatty, chatty all day. To actually say, I'm sorry, I'm just a bit quieter right now, to
Yeah,
make that socially acceptable. And
exactly.
I get that not everyone might want to do that, but for those that are comfortable to do that, why not? You
Yeah,
know?
but we're not machines. We don't work like machines, do we? And also, like, you might have gone away, like, she might have not been that chatty. You might have gone away and thought, oh, is she annoyed with me? Or, like, oh my,
Yeah, she was really rude.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We actually don't, like, it's good to actually be open about this. And I feel like before the pandemic, no one talked about mental health.
Mm,
Everyone talks about mental health. Everyone's open to talking about how they feel rather than
mm,
doing that British thing where we're, yeah, fine, thanks.
Yes.
Now it's like I really hope like we all start as a nation start talking about like, oh, I got PMS or I'm on my period today, so I'm a bit quiet.
Yeah. And I think there's some controversy around it. I know there's some women might not want to talk about it because they don't want to be treated differently to a man. And I think there's a big difference between being treated differently from a man and just accepting that our physiology and our bodies, our anatomy is so different, and we have this whole cycle. They get testosterone, I think, every 15 minutes. So they're good. Um, but two things I think are really helpful to know for women that don't currently track their cycle: downloading an app and tracking your cycle throughout that. Even if you don't want to take your temperature each day, which some of the apps encourage you to do to measure your ovulation, even just noting down how you're feeling on days where you're feeling particularly good, particularly bad, that means you can forward plan. You can forward plan those projects, those creative brainstorms with your teams. Those really big moments, and just having it on your phone. The second thing I would say that's really amazing for our hormones as women is our circadian rhythm. So I'm assuming a lot of business owners have been there where they've woken up in the morning and they've gone straight on their laptops, and they're on their laptops till like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And sometimes that is a necessary evil. But yeah, I'm sure you've done that
I've been
before.
there. I've been there.
But if you can, even just get up just for 10 minutes first thing in the morning and get that morning light, and the same in the evening, that really helps to maintain your circadian rhythm. And that is so good for your hormones and just keeping everything balanced in your body. That light at those times of the day really make sure your body clock is working efficiently. And that means your whole body then works efficiently, your metabolism, your hormones, everything. So I'd strongly encourage everyone to do that and to get outside. The sunlight is the best thing for us, and being out in nature. I know some people think it's a bit woo-woo, but honestly, for our physiology, it's just the best thing ever. So I'd really encourage people to just find those little snippets throughout the day and do that where they can.
Yeah. Zoe, this has been fantastic, and I can't wait to share this with everyone.
Oh, it's been so
Uh,
good. Thank
Yeah,
you for having me.
you're no, you're so welcome, and it's like yeah, there's so many juicy things that you've shared today, so thank you so much.
No worries.
Yeah, we'll share the graphic alongside this as well, so that people
If
can
anyone has any questions, I know we could do like a Q&A, like that would be really good if people had loads of follow-ups. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
great. And I will tag your Instagram handle in the caption as well, so
Great, thank you.
can people find you?
So on Instagram at Zoe Jane Hindle, and my website, which is zoejanehindle.com.
Perfect. So
Thank you
um
so much.
so hearing all the other things that you have to share as well. I love following you on Instagram. So
Oh, thank you.
thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye bye.
bye.